Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're digging into a crisis of housing, crime, and just straight-up urban decay in South Africa. And this whole story, it really kicks off with one single tragic number: 77. In the early morning hours of August 31st, 2023, this was the number that absolutely shocked a nation. A fire just ripped through a building in Johannesburg. 77 lives lost, 88 more people injured. I mean, we're talking about one of the deadliest fires in the country's entire history. But you have to understand, this wasn't just some random accident. It was a symptom of a much, much deeper problem. So that's the real question, isn't it? How does a place that's supposed to be a shelter turn into a literal death trap? To figure that out, we have to look way beyond the flames and deep into the shadows of a really broken system. The fire broke out right here at 80 Albert Street. Now, this is a building owned by the city, and believe me, its complicated, dark past kind of tells the story of Johannesburg itself. Just look at the history here. It's this tragic cycle. It started its life as a center for control during apartheid. Then, it got repurposed into a women's shelter. But eventually, it just fell into the hands of criminal gangs. And get this, they packed in up to 400 people, collected rent, and then locked the gates at night. It turned a supposed refuge into a tomb. This whole tragedy threw a really harsh spotlight on a huge urban problem known as hijacked buildings. And that term, it describes this massive, illegal, and very profitable criminal enterprise. Now, let's be really clear about this. This is not just a case of squatting. This is an organized business. Criminal syndicates literally seize control of buildings and run them as their own shadow rental empire, preying on the most vulnerable people you can imagine. And their business model? It's a calculated takeover. First, the syndicates find a vulnerable property. Then, they just seize control by force and start collecting rent, in cash, from desperate tenants. They pocket every single cent of the profit, while the legal owners, they're left on the hook for taxes and city bills they can't even afford to pay. 338. That's how many government-owned buildings are confirmed to be hijacked across South Africa. But that's not even the whole story. In Johannesburg city center alone, some estimates say the real number, including private buildings, is over 1,100. The scale of this is just staggering. So you might be wondering, why is this crisis so bad in a city like Johannesburg? Well, the answer really lies in decades of social and economic turmoil. You see, a whole sequence of historical events created the perfect storm for this to happen. After apartheid ended, businesses fled the city center, leaving behind a huge vacuum. Then, a massive influx of people looking for work created this severe housing shortage. And of course, criminal syndicates saw a golden opportunity to profit from all that desperation. And who's living inside these buildings? It's a really vulnerable mix of people. We're talking about impoverished South Africans, undocumented migrants, and just families who have absolutely nowhere else to go. They're trapped between extreme poverty on one side and the syndicates who exploit them on the other. So why can't the authorities just go in and kick everyone out? Well, it's because there's this complex web of laws, political inaction, and frankly, real physical danger that has created a complete system paralysis. For the actual property owners, it's just a bizarre financial nightmare. They are still legally responsible for all the city bills, taxes, services, on buildings they literally can't even enter. And meanwhile, the hijackers, they pay nothing and pocket all the rent. And here's where it gets really ironic. A law that was designed with good intentions to prevent homelessness has actually become a legal shield for these syndicates. Because the city is required to provide alternative housing before an eviction, and it often can't, the courts are just completely gridlocked. This basically allows the syndicates to operate with total impunity. After that big fire, the blame game just erupted. You had officials blaming nonprofits for blocking evictions. Then you had the nonprofits and the owners blaming the city for failing to provide basic services and safety. It's a perfect picture of deep dysfunction and just a total lack of accountability. And make no mistake, challenging these syndicates isn't just a legal battle, it's a physical one. People who try to reclaim their own properties face death threats. Some, like the activist DJ Warris, have paid the ultimate price just for trying. So after the fire, an official inquiry was launched, and what they found really challenges the common story we hear about this crisis. It points towards a much deeper, more systemic problem. Okay, this right here is probably the most stunning finding from that whole inquiry. While the criminal slumlords are a very real problem, they only account for less than 6% of the issue. The true drivers, by an overwhelming margin, are extreme poverty and a desperate, desperate lack of affordable housing. So this leads to two totally different ideas about what the solution is. One perspective, which you hear from figures like the former mayor Herman Mashaba, basically frames this as a criminal issue. The solution? A strong law and order response. Raid the buildings, arrest the criminals.
But then there's the other perspective, which is backed up by the Commission's evidence. It argues that this is fundamentally a social crisis. You can't arrest your way out of poverty, right? This view says the only real long-term solution is to build more affordable housing and provide social support.
And these two very different diagnoses, they lead to vastly different solutions. One is a policy of policing and eviction. The other is a policy of development and social welfare.
At the end of the day, the entire issue really boils down to this one question. And how it gets answered will determine not just the future of South Africa's cities, but the fate of the thousands of people living inside these ticking time bombs.